Okay, good morning. Good morning. Sorry, I was losing my Fitbit. Today's Monday, January the 11th, 2016. It's 9 o'clock. Today we have Bob Miller, my friend from Crossroads Country Church, to come do the invocation. So if you will stand for that and remain standing for the pledge.
Let's pray. Father, thank you today that you did not choose to remain aloof from us, but you cared enough to step into time, history, and into our personal experiences. You chose to make your son missionary to a lost world. And then, Father, you offered through him, through Jesus, strength and wisdom and the ability to live every day, not just Sunday, but every day in your power and in your strength. And for that, I'm thankful. And I believe a majority of us probably in this room are very thankful to you in the name of Jesus.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
First thing on the agenda today, before we start anything, I'd just like to introduce our new purchasing agent. Her name is Vicki Shelton. She's standing right there. She didn't want to come up today because it's her first day. And we're not going to put her on the spot. So Vicki, welcome to Potter County. If there's anything we can do for you, don't ask.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. The first thing we're going to talk about today is recognition of minutes from the December 29, 2015 Potter County Commissioners Court meeting. Just recognize only if there's no questions. So recognized. There are no budget amendments, is that correct? Number 3, vouchers. Consider an act upon the approval of the payment of vouchers processed by the County Auditor's Office for the period of December 23rd, 2015, January 6, 2016, check numbers 1664110 through 166615, and wire transfers numbers 656 through 660 in the amount of $2,073,652.64.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented. I'm sorry, accept the vouchers as presented. Okay.
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor, raise your hand. 0. Number 4, the quarterly budget comparison to recognize the first quarter comparison report for fiscal year 15, fiscal year 16.
Just the one question I have, Carrie, as it relates to the revenue, but I feel like this is timing of when the statements went out. We're currently at 29.90%. This time last year, we were at 33.91, but I'm assuming that's when the statements went out a little later that year. Is that this year? Yes. Thank you for taking time to pull this quarterly report.
Any other statements, comments? Okay, not that so recognized. Number 5, tax office to consider and act upon tax refunds for overpayment of taxes. Sure, you got a lot this time, huh? Is this typically just people getting their bill and paying it, not knowing if the mortgage company is paying it too?
No, the majority goes to the power company pay, with the mortgage company. There are a few in there that owner paid it, and I do have a correction there. We're showing to refund one for 6207 Adirondack. Charles and Lauren Nobles. We did receive a letter from them requesting that refund instead of their mortgage company. That's the correction that I handed out this morning.
Sherry, there appear to be quite a few from Core Logic. That is the bulk of it, probably 80% of what's in here, if not more. Is there something that happened on their end from accounting purposes?
No, they're a mortgage loan servicing company, and so they have multiple mortgage companies. So it looks like they're all going to them, but they'll be going to whichever mortgage company they're representing.
Okay.
Need a motion, please?
I move we approve the tax refunds for payment as presented.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the favor, raise your hand. 4-0. Thank you. Thank you. And then the next thing, if you want to stay up there too, just to recognize, Sherry enters 20 hours of continuing education credits per Senate Bill 546. Very good. So you have, how many hours do you have to have every year? 20 every year, so you're doing good.
I'm doing great.
Insurance report. Okay, is there anything unusual or we need to discuss on this, or just?
No, ma'am, nothing unusual.
Nothing unusual, okay. Is there any questions, comments? Anybody? So recognized. CGI Communications. Is anybody here from CGI? I think we're gonna be here today. Let me just give you a little rundown on what this is. I was accosted, no, I'm kidding, at the legislative update by some people from CGI asking us to do a video for our website. And so I thought it sounded like a promising deal, so came back and I think I talked to Alfonso about it. Got with Jason Patrick, he and I put our heads together, came up with a list of people and places that we thought would benefit our video. And Jason put in more work on it than I did. And he got Katie involved. Is Katie here? No, she was involved in it, and then Shannon got involved in it, and together, the four of us, mostly y'all, did all the work and got everybody on board, and we had such great communication with everybody. We had people, I just jotted down a few. We went to Wes Reeves with Excel, Beth Duke, Andy Justice with his real estate company, Bert Palmer, Howie Batson. We contacted your priest, but he never did call us back. Dana West, Bobby Lee, Laura Street, William Ware, Mary Barlow, Kurt Cornett with River Breaks Ranch, Randy and Austin Sharp with Woodland Square, Chad Laurie with Embers. We tried to stay local with local people, local area stuff, and I went to Bill Helicopter, Pantex, Northwest Hospital. We did a little bit of everything, and poor Katie, I think for 3 days, she stood with me, went with this photographer and videographer, and all I did was have to do some little welcome thing. I thought that's all I was gonna have to do. Ended up having to do some voiceover stuff, so that was interesting. Anyway, it's a good thing. I can't wait to see it. They were supposed to be here today to introduce themselves. They're not here. They may be en route, so if they show up, we'll let them talk. But the video is done, and now all they're doing is coming to Amarillo now to sell advertising. That's how they make their money. There's no cost to the county. They just sell advertising, and people put advertising on our video, and that's how they pay for it. So when it comes out, I will tell you to go to it, look at it. It's going to be, I think, very beneficial for the county. So moving on. If they show up, we'll talk to them. Number 9, tax increment reinvestment zone. To hear a report on the tiers request associated with double R lofts and adaptive reuse of a warehouse into residential units and located at 705 Southeast Grant Street. And to hear a report on the tiers request associated with the lofts on 10th, a retail and residential mixed-use development project. Mr. Shaw. Good morning.
Morning, Judge. Thank you all for having me this morning.
Sure.
I guess the first project that I was going to speak about, and really the reason I'm here is back with the, as stated with the original agreement between Potter County and the city when the tax increment reinvestment zone was established. That any incentive project was recommended for approval by the Tiers Board. Process for that approval would involve presenting that project in front of this body to get comments on. And also have an opportunity for this body to forward any comments to the city council through the city secretary before they consider it. And as with any project, the city council has the final approval on any of the projects that are being recommended by the Tiers Board. So that's why I'm here today, is to talk to you about a couple of projects. The first one, the Double R Lofts. With this particular project, if a lot of what I'm saying sounds familiar, then you've got a good memory, because I talked to you about it before, about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. It was approved as it was actually the second incentive project ever approved by the Tiers Board. And at that time, that was before the downtown design standards were in place. So a lot of what I'm here to talk about has already been discussed, but with that project, there are certain milestones that were part of that agreement. As we do with any agreement, there are certain milestones that you must meet as the developer or whoever receives that agreement, that you need to accomplish certain things by certain deadlines. This particular project, when it was approved, shortly thereafter, was really when the financial markets took a downturn. And because of a lot of financial reasons, the developer had some difficulty in securing financing, and so he was not able to meet some of those deadlines, and therefore that original agreement expired. He did keep his permit active, and he's been doing work on that project little by little, but now he feels he's to the point to where he's ready to finish the project. And so he approached the Tiers Board again to renew basically the agreement that he was approved for renewal. So the actual project, it's on 705 South Durant, just behind, just east of the city hall. It's backed up to the railroad. And it's a building that was actually built in 1926 and was used as a wholesale fruit distributorship for many years. The building itself is about 37,000 square feet, and the proposal is to renovate, reuse that square footage for 25 residential condo units. And the proposal is to lease those out at first, although there is some possibility that those could be sold as individual units in the future, but right now the developer thinks that the leasing would be the best option currently. The property owner is Darren Hudson. He's done a few of these projects before, some in Colorado, one in Albuquerque, and those have been successful. This is his first project attempt here in Amarillo. So the project, he's planning to put in about $3 million on the adaptive reuse of the building. There's been extensive remodeling inside the building. He's now also working on the outside of the building. The original proposal was for 20 units. He's now increased that to 25 units. Makes the project a little bit more feasible. Some of the original units were very large units, over 3,000 square feet. And I believe the market will be more accepting of a smaller unit, so that's why we created the extra 5 units and have gone from 20 units to 25. But it is it's the adaptive reuse of a warehouse into residential units. Both of those items or elements of the project clearly meet the intent of the downtown strategic action plan. That being adaptive reuse of historic buildings and also creating residential properties within the downtown. So the project itself clearly meets the intent of the strategic action plan. What he's here to, what he's asked the Tiers Board and what they have recommended is approval of a 20-year incentive agreement, which would be a rebate, a tax increment only on the increase in the property value over a 20-year span. This is 2016, so the tiers expires in 2036. So, as far as any 20-year rebates, which you have seen, for most of the projects that have come before you, this will be the last year that you may see any 20-year projects because, materials will expire, in 20 years. As I've mentioned before, most of the projects, were 20 years. However, a lot of those were predicated on, you needed something to get the ball rolling, and some of these projects were the first of their kind. There's really no market comparability, and as well for this type of a project still. And so some of the incentives needed to secure that financial feasibility part of it was some of the main reasons some of the prior projects have been approved. This particular project is, again, seeking that 90% rebate for a 20-year period. It's going to be capped at 2036. The incentives being requested again to secure some private financing, and basically was the last step that he needed to go through to make the project financially feasible. So, as I stated, you looked at this project before. It was recommended for approval by the Tier Board before. We do have the design standards in place. It went before the Design Review Board. They did approve it. It was recommended for approval by a 3-2 vote. So it does have its certificate of appropriateness through the Design Review Board. Although it didn't meet all the elements of the design standards, the Design Review Board really looked at it through the glasses of, this project had already been approved once before. They really didn't, they felt like they didn't want to pull the rug underneath the project, considering all the previous work that's gone into it, both by the Tier Board and the property owner himself. So given the sort of extenuating circumstances of this project, and some of the elements that it did meet, they recommended approval of the certificate of appropriateness. This is going to be going in front of the City Council at their January 19th meeting. So I'll be glad to answer any questions or take any comments, but technically speaking, if you do have any comments, those would need to be over to the city secretary prior to the City Council's meeting we have. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Could you say the owner is Darren who?
Darren Hudson.
Hudson?
Many years ago, about 2009, I guess, they opened up an apartment over there for us to take a look at. One beautiful place. Has anybody ever occupied it?
He has had a couple of occupants that he's rented that out basically to a couple of occupants. And basically ever since it's been finished, there's been somebody in it at some point in time. They've done 2 tours. Originally they had a tour through that many years ago, and then they just recently had a tour as well. And it's a very, very nice unit.
Pretty unique.
Yes, it is.
Seen it.
I might mention, since I do serve on that Tiers Board, the only concern was the security wall that is being planned, and I think that was what Kelly was talking about, that the Design Standards Board had kind of approved. But anyway, I think it's a great project for downtown, and in that area, I think that security wall is a real must. So.
I think the good thing about that is there was some really robust discussion in the Design Review Board meeting, and it's just brought up the question that in that particular district of downtown and the Tiers boundary, downtown design boundary, that warehouse district, are the design standards that are in place currently, do they lend themselves to actual use of those buildings? And so the positive that has come out of this so far is that we as staff have recognized that maybe it's time to go back and look at those standards and discuss that issue. Because one of the main elements of the design standards is to create a more pedestrian-friendly, transparent, open environment. And that 8-foot wall, doesn't really lend itself towards that, but, the realities of residential living in a downtown area, that was a real concern for the developer. And so, we as staff, we have some appointments that we're currently underway making to refill some vacant positions that have expired in the Downtown Design Review Board. Once those new members are in place, we intend, with the developer of this project, with other interested parties, we intend to open up that discussion and really look at those design standards and see, is there something we need to address in that warehouse district regarding security and safety and that kind of thing.
So Kelly, and Commissioner, you might be able to add to this as well, so as it relates to an 8-foot wall, is that an 8-foot concrete wall?
It's an 8-foot masonry wall.
Masonry wall.
Is there any way you can show the audience a picture of it that we have here?
I don't have
We
that
can share
on
Jason,
my
would you mind?
disc.
Put that on the.
There are portions of the wall, that are, solid. And then there are some portions of the wall that have the, wrought iron fencing, so some transparency to it, but some, solid.
So I'm interested to know from a security perspective, and, Commissioner, you alluded something to this of, that side of the downtown. What is it that we're trying to keep out via the wall, just for my own sake?
Well, we were concerned with the railroad being right there, and folks jumping off there at the railroad. The other concern is that ground level apartments, their window is right there at street level. And so even if people walk along the street, you have no privacy because people are looking in your window all the time. And if you've been down there, the warehouse is really just right on that sidewalk. It doesn't have any space from the sidewalk and the street, so for security and privacy, that was the reason for that.
Do you think that will be consistent for any other residential or mixed use across that regime of the warehouse district? I mean, you kind of alluded to the board's gonna take another look at what are the standards, but do you feel like the 8-foot wall would be where we fall back on? Or is there a different kind of security measure that maybe we're not thinking of?
Well,
Or other downtown areas have used?
well, that's a point that, there are several residential projects in other downtown areas in the downtown urban area that don't have, the security wall. So it can be done, it has been done in other places without it. What we have here is, and a little different here, is that this is the first one here, so there aren't any others to compare to. Also, the area that it's in is, some of those other areas are already bustling, active, and that's where you get your security is activity, where there really is not a whole lot of here in this area. So some of those elements combined really concern the developer, and I think we're understood by the Design Review Board. But moving forward, I think it's just worth having the discussion, is this something that we need to look at having as an alternative, or are there other ways that we can address that? The picture that you're seeing actually is an older rendering of the project. There's much more transparency with the wrought iron fence now that basically will go up to the edge of the building. So only kind of the facade of the building will be behind the 8-foot wall.
I've just seen some creative things done with fencing and landscaping and ivy, and to really have a more inclusive and inviting atmosphere. I'm migrating, and I'm mindful to the railroad tracks have always kind of been a dividing line in the city. And so anything adding to that, hence a wall, an 8-foot wall, may give an unintended presence or a consequence to continuing that division. So that's really kind of where some of my comments are, but to follow the process, Kelly, I'll absolutely get that documented forward to the city secretary so she can send that to council.
Council would appreciate it.
And then the only other question that I have is as it relates to the recommendation. So I was surprised that this was 90% at 20 years. And you referenced, the tiers would be expiring in 20 years, but given the size of this project as it compares to the other projects that Tiers has approved, prior to going into the detail and prepping for the meeting, I expected to see this anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 as a potential incentive. So I was surprised to see 20. Is there any reason this project went straight to 20 other than that's what we've typically done?
Well, because of the nature of the financing that the developer has, it was, as a matter of fact, I met with his financial team, and it was a cog that was needed in order to secure some private financing. And also that combined with all of his pro formas and work up to this point, whether it's right or not, it's based on the previous agreement that was approved. And so it was really a matter of all of the work, which is considerable, having gone into the project so far, and then coming back with the same project. And it was more that, and also this being the first project like this in that area, that the request was appropriate, given all of that.
Okay. And then my last question on this is the Exhibit B that you referenced, the amount of TIP funding requested. There's 4.1 million. Is that, I'm assuming that's the aggregate over 20 years, but I just want to make sure I'm following this grid correctly.
It is, but that's all based on a projection of the building value.
Correct.
On the majority of these projects, the building, or the structure's value's been overstated or over projected. I haven't seen a project yet that has come in to meet what was projected as the finished appraised value. So that's a projection, but the increment is going to be, no matter what that projection is, the increment is going to be 90%. What the difference between today's value, which was about $157,000, and whatever that projected, or whatever that appraised value is upon completion. So regardless of the projection, the developers use that basically for themselves, and I always caution them when they're sticking in numbers in their pro formas to really be careful about that projected appraised value, because so far they've been way below that as far as appraised value. So it would just be that difference between the final appraised value, is value now, and that would be.
Thank you very much.
When is the projected date of completion if they get this complete?
They have actually, those milestones that I was talking about, they're required to have a certificate of occupancy before the end of this year.
I'm with Commissioner Morgia. I really hate to go for 20 years on this, since it is such a small, in comparison to other ones we've done, it's such a small project. I'd hate to go. I would say 5. Is that unreasonable to present that to your city commission?
No, I'm certainly making that comment to our city council. Definitely aware of that.
Okay.
I kind of feel like the project was originally for the 20 years, so I don't have any issue with it continuing to 20 years. You can pass that on to them too.
Yes, I voted for it, and I voted for it, so my opinion.
2 and 2.
So you're okay with 20 years?
We're trying to get people to come down there
I
and
understand.
to get financing based on some of these figures. I just don't think
So the difference would be if we don't do anything and they can't complete the project, we lose the project, so.
Yeah, but I think, quite honestly, Commissioner, whether this is right or wrong, that's often a tool that's used against this commission. Well, then you lose the whole thing. I think back to some abatements, and I just don't think that's a fair tool to use against the commission to make a decision that we think might be right. But I understand.
As indicated, though, the original project was 20 years. It's the same project, just a different about 5 years.
But a lot has changed in 5 years from when they originally, applied for the dollars, and even the whole tiers and the standards have changed. None of that existed, to my knowledge at that point, at least not to the regimented approach that it is now. So I think that for them as an entity to assume that everything will be the same when so much has changed is really kind of not fair on their business model as well, from my perspective.
Okay, thank you for your report on that. Let's move to the next one.
The next project that's being recommended for material assistance is the loss on 10th. 202 Southwest 10th, which is, and you probably have all seen it, practically complete now. Just east or just west of the sushi.
I'll let the audience see that too.
This particular building was built in the 1930s. And again, going back to our strategic action plan, anytime we can adaptively reuse some of these older buildings is just a huge positive for the downtown area. This particular building is being remodeled and has about 6,600 square feet of residential space on top. Which there's 7 residential units on top of the building, and then there's 3 spaces or about 4,500 square feet on the bottom level. It's being used for different types of uses, retail type uses. There's a salon, and currently, if you haven't been in that, I encourage you to go in there and look around. It's very well done. So the project, property owner, Mr. Austin Sharp, they actually were not anticipating requesting tiered assistance on this project. However, as with a lot of these types of projects, upon construction, they encountered some issues that really affected their financial pro forma. They were, in tearing out the building inside, they found that there actually was no foundation under the look, there were literally concrete pillars on dirt. They had no idea that was existing. So they had to completely tear all of that out. I'm not like Mr. Hank, I'll tell you more about that, but that's an issue. But they had to go back in and completely redo the foundation, which was very expensive. And then upon doing the parking in the back of the residential units, they found out there was a basement underneath the back, which they completely had to address and fill in. So they took some hits on their financial pro forma. They had targeted basically a certain internal rate of return on their investment, and that investment being about $2 million. And so for the financial feasibility of the project, and also putting in all the streetscape elements that are recommended by the downtown design standards, they're asking for a 10-year 90% tax rebate. In order to, because of their pro forma and their numbers, having to outlay that initial, or that cash on the construction, addressing those issues, really brought their rate of return down. Enough so that where they felt to provide the stability and feasibility of the project, they needed that assistance. Right now, they're leased up, I believe, but part of the incentive request is uncertainty about leasing. So because of the expenses they encountered with the project, they're requesting that assistance. The property right now is appraised at about $80,000, putting in about $2 million, or they have put in about $2 million on the project. This particular incentive request would just be for 10 years. And so the project itself meets almost every aspect of the downtown strategic action plan that it can. It's adaptive reuse of the historic building. It's a mixed-use project. It provides residential units, ground floor retail, small spaces for the mom and pop type retail businesses. So as far as the downtown revitalization efforts go, it's a good project. And also, that being just a 10-year, so these are the kinds of things that we would like to see, where they're asking for the incentive for a specific reason. The project meets all the standards, and so Tiers Board, it did receive a certificate of appropriate from the Design Review Board. Tiers recommended approval of it unanimously. So if you have any other questions, I'd be glad to answer.
I just think it's a much thoughtful strategy to come back, not initially have that in the pro forma, because it doesn't put the tiers or any of the government bodies that need to approve in any awkward position that the project may not occur, and that they're coming, asking for the funding because of some unknowns that they did not have projected. And then you actually have a true market value after completion for your projection, and you're not getting this inflated rate kind of downstream. I think it's a much better strategy, and I applaud them for that. In 10 years.
I'm good with that too, so. Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments on that one? Thank you, Kelly. Let's move on while you're still there to community planning program number 10, addressing disadvantaged area initiative. This is a community effort thing that we've been working on for a while. I know the community, so with Commissioner Dia. Councilman Jefferson is in the audience today. He's on the committee. Bob Cowell, Kelly Shaw. Who else? Is that it? Thank you, yes. Okay.
Okay, I'm really excited to talk to you about this today. Again, thank you for having me on your agenda for this. We, as staff, talked to the city council last week about this exciting initiative. And I'll be speaking about a couple of different things today, briefly about a couple of things, but really more specifically about an initiative that actually is already underway. We're really excited about, and that we're really excited about the partnership that's formed between the city and the county. So I'll speak more about that in just a little bit. But as the title slide shows, what we've got going on in the city right now is we have a really exciting thing happening where the city council has given us 5 priorities, us being city staff. And those 5 priorities are what our new interim city manager wants all of our efforts and focus to be on. That's our direction. And that's really exciting. And speaking on behalf of staff, that's exciting to have that direction. And from that, one of those priorities, as you see on the title slide, one of those priorities was addressing disadvantaged areas of the city. And from that, a team of staff took that and thought that's true, but we were recommending that it get established to a community-wide initiative with the focus and priority given to the older and more distressed areas of the city. City manager is going to be rolling all of this out, this new direction out tomorrow at the city council at City Hall. And I would encourage anybody that's here today to attend that meeting and listen to that. I think it's going to be a very exciting presentation. And so he'll talk more about the whole direction in those 5 priorities. But as far as this one, staff recommended that we really look at basically a community planning program that tries to improve all areas of the city, and this community planning program can really be looked at as like an umbrella program. And you can address so many different elements of the community under that type of a program. You can address things like housing needs, character or image of the city, economic development, infrastructure needs, streets and intersections, and sidewalks. So there are so many different initiatives and plans and programs that can be associated with a community planning program that gives you an opportunity to really make a difference. So where do you implement such a program? As I mentioned, we have clear direction from our council that we want to look at the disadvantaged areas in our community. But with a citywide initiative, we think we can look at, make it a citywide program, but definitely what we want to do is focus on those the older, more distressed areas of the city first, and that would be clearly our priority. What we would want to do is, we really would want to look at the whole city and define those boundaries. So to have a successful planning program, it really helps if you define a smaller area. We have comprehensive plans for the entire city. Comprehensive plan speaks about something just like this, as it defines smaller areas, because there are different areas of the city that have different needs. And so what we would first do in such a program is define a smaller area and define those boundaries where they make sense. Logical boundaries of those smaller areas. You can address districts, Clemens Eccles Historic District. You can identify corridors. Amarillo Boulevard is a corridor that I think could really benefit from a corridor plan. And you can also identify neighborhoods. There are several neighborhoods that obviously could benefit from a neighborhood plan type thing. The Heights, San Jacinto, the East Amarillo area, Aria. So make those boundaries, identify those areas, and then once that's done, then start focusing and prioritizing, looking at first the more distressed areas of Amarillo. So specifically what we would do, one of the tools that planners use in community planning program is a neighborhood plan. What a neighborhood plan is, it's really a focused, targeted plan on a specific area with specific goals and actions to address those concerns. A lot of those things that were under that umbrella, that plan could be a good tool to use to address some of those things. The really exciting part about this, I think, is that it's perfect timing. I mentioned the city council's priorities that we've been given. Also, the partnership that was already underway with Potter County Commission and the city council with providing funding to address a neighborhood type plan. All of that's coming together at exactly the right time, and so it's really perfect timing between this initiative and this new partnership that we're really excited about. Also, Potter County and the City of Amarillo agreed to put in $75,000 each towards this program. And what that does is with staff, City of Amarillo planning staff, being involved in creating a plan. What it does, and you can spend $150,000 easily on hiring a consultant to go out and do something like this. However, being in the planning profession, it's something that planners do and have done. And so what we thought is that it makes much more sense to maybe have the City of Amarillo planning staff lead this program, and then there would be some minor expenses associated with creating the plan, but leave the bulk of that $150,000 to actually apply towards implementing the plan in some form or fashion, whatever that might be. So it's really good timing. To start this off, and as I mentioned, it's already underway. What should a neighborhood plan do? Well, it should represent the views of the citizens that make up those neighborhoods. That's probably first and foremost. It basically will identify the strengths and assets of a neighborhood. Also, it would help identify the weaknesses and some of the threats particular area. And it will ultimately establish goals on how to address those issues. And then there will also be an implementation part of it where you formulate specific actions and strategies that address some of those strengths and weaknesses. So that's what a neighborhood plan should do. I think even a better question would be, how can it help? First and foremost, and probably the most important thing, is it describes very clearly what the property owners and residents in that neighborhood want their neighborhood to be. That's, I think, so important. I can't stress it enough. It's an opportunity for them to get involved, which I'll speak about here in a little bit. Provides them an opportunity to get involved, discuss the issues in their neighborhood, discuss the goals, what they want their neighborhood to be, and it helps staff formulate what do we need to do to get there. So that's very important, and also provides a framework for other things that we could do for like zoning amendments. Our land use is an issue there. So any ordinances that the city is in charge of provides a framework of what we can do to help address those issues. It also gives direction to the city's programs. It offers residences and businesses a clear picture of what they want for their neighborhood. And also important, it provides an opportunity for the external people, developers and potential property owners. It provides them an opportunity to see what's going on, see what those goals are, and gives them a clear picture to perhaps look at and say, you know what, that's pretty exciting what's going on over there. There's some needs that I see, and maybe my business would be a perfect fit over there in this neighborhood, at this place. So it doesn't only help the people that live in the neighborhood, it can help people, potential businesses and other property owners outside of the neighborhood. So that's a really important product of it. As far as the plan itself, there's a lot of things on this diagram, but they're all important. But I'll boil it down to about 3 or 4 major steps. The very first thing in creating a neighborhood plan, as far as the process goes, is you're going to be assessing the existing conditions. What's on the ground now? What's there now? You're going to be assessing that and identifying that SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And from that, you're going to identify the challenges, and so identify the assets, identify the challenges. And then once that comes together, then you can formulate those objectives. Okay, here's what we've got. Here's where we think we want to be. So that's the bulk of that, the second phase of the process. And then that third phase would be to establish those strategies and actions that get you to your objective. To get from where you are now to where you want to be, you got to have some actions, clearly defined actions to get there. And then you would have an implementation part of the plan. How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Short term, long term, those types of things. So that would all be taken care of in the implementation part of the process. The middle part of that diagram says public participation. And I can't stress enough how important that is and is going to be in this type of process. Throughout the process, you have to have that public engaged, and you have to have them participate in it, because again, you want them to tell you where they want their neighborhood to be, what they want it to be. Without that, it just becomes another plan that's probably going to sit on a shelf if you don't have any buy-in. Another thing that this process does with the public part of it, other people will have an opportunity to see this and see what's going on in the neighborhood, and they themselves may start attending some of these workshops and some of these discussion points to where they could learn about what this neighborhood is doing for that neighborhood. And wouldn't it be great if they went back from the meeting saying, you know what, that's pretty exciting, I'd like to do that for my neighborhood. And so there's some overlapping or some educational opportunities and even kind of marketing opportunities to see what they're doing over there. I think I'd like to see something like that going on in my neighborhood. But public participation plan will be developed and will be implemented throughout the process. Specifically, we wanted to get started. And as has been mentioned, we have a smaller group that consists of Clark County Commissioner Mercy, Maria, and the judge, as well as Councilman Emerson and some staff who met and talked about this. And first off, we needed something to start with, and so we looked at some of those older, more distressed areas. And those, in no particular order, were established. Examples would be the Heights, the Barrio, San Jacinto neighborhood, East Amarillo, Eastridge, and North Amarillo. Those are those priority areas that we're talking about, those older, more disadvantaged or distressed areas. So those would be the areas that we would target first. And what we have started on the staff is a neighborhood plan for the Heights area. So that's going to be our first area, and then our second area that's been identified is to address the Barrio neighborhood. So those are our two first priorities, and those are the ones that we're starting with. We already have underway a neighborhood plan for the Heights area, and that existing, identify and assess the existing conditions, that's already underway with staff. And again, on this slide, I just tried to, again, focus on those main three phases that this plan will go through. We've already done the first phase, and after that, we'll move through phase 2 and 3. And again, there are some major milestones where we'll have these public input sessions. The plan is to establish sort of an advisory steering committee of stakeholders, and have them be our sounding board and work very closely with us as staff throughout this process, but have about 3 major public workshops where we put out a lot of information and solicit a lot of input. So that'll be throughout these phases. As far as the timeline, this is just a general timeline that we put together. Again, with those 3 phases that I talked about. It's probably a little hard to read, but we kicked off phase 1 already. This is part of that phase, this presentation. Very 1st of February, we plan that neighborhood plan kickoff to where we get out in the neighborhood and we hold that first public workshop and talk about the plan and what we're going to be doing and already start gathering that input. So that's February. What this timeline is trying to show is that we're starting on that first project, that being the Heights neighborhood. So you see those major milestones associated with the 3 phases for the Heights on top of the timeline. What we wanted to show on the bottom part of that timeline is that about the 2/3 of the way through the first neighborhood plan, we want to go ahead and get started on the second neighborhood plan, which would be for the Barrio, which would start sometime in early summer. So while we're wrapping up that first plan, we'd like to go ahead and start off with that second plan and start the same type of process with the Barrio. And then I think it's also very important just to remind everybody that this program is going to be ongoing. So these are our first 2 that we want to start with. Others will follow, and this will just be an ongoing program and really tie back in to those city council priorities, what this partnership is trying to accomplish, and then also ultimately tie back in with the comprehensive plan for the entire city. So we're very excited about it, and I just want to once again focus on what we're really excited about is the public input aspect of this planning process. That is so important, and as the last slide indicates, it's really not about the product that you get, the deliverable at the end of the process. It's really about the process itself, and if that's not successful, the plan's not going to be successful. So that's what we're going to focus on, and I really appreciate the time to talk to you about it. I'm excited about it. It's underway, so be happy to answer your questions.
Kelly, as usual, very, very good job. I'm excited about this too. I'm on the committee and, this is something that I addressed during my campaign. And I'm with you 100%, so we gotta do something.
What kind of funding do you think is going to be needed over the whole process?
Well, as I mentioned, you know, there are gonna be some, expenses related to the process. But in the scheme of things, there will be nominal expenses, like, depending on where we get the rooms, we might have to rent a room somewhere. So room expenses, we would like to provide refreshments at those, you know, if they say have something to eat and drink, and people kind of, so, but we want to make it a positive experience, so, we're thinking, and then maybe some in the printing costs of the plan, once it's done, you know, somewhere around $3,000 to $5,000 tops throughout the whole process, just for those types of associated expenses.
And I think, Commissioner, part of your question might be, once the plan unveils something, the work that needs to be done to improve or continue the efforts, what is funding that we might be looking at short-term and long-term? And I don't know that certainly don't want to speak for you, Kelly. I don't know that we know enough of that yet, but that's certainly kind of on our radar. And I wanted to publicly thank you, Commissioner, and Commissioner Church, and Commissioner Vaughn, and Judge, when we discussed this during budget, the $75,000 that we had slotted was really for strategic plan, and we didn't know a lot of what that would entail. And so really a trust factor on your part, and thank you for allowing us to use that to go to the table and ask for the match, if you will, from the city. We timed that from when they were vetting their budget process, and originally that $75,000 wasn't in the original budget, and so we attended that in their work session, and Councilman Demerson spoke to the benefit of trying to match that and give staff room, if you will, to help work and evolve it into what it could be. So I would echo the comments, and Kelly, you and the team and Bob have done a phenomenal job of getting us this far. And thank you for that, and thank you to each one of you for allowing us some flexibility, because we didn't really know what it would be yet.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity and are excited about it. It's gonna be a lot of hard work involved. I think the good thing about it is whatever comes out of the plan, and you're right, we'll find out through the planning process some of the things that are gonna need to be. That's where the real, you know, part of that discussion about the objectives, that's a really important part of when you say, okay, let's talk about the financial realities of things, and what can we do and what can't we do, and maybe some things may be more long-term. And again, you know, we've got budget, it seems like we talked about it a few days ago, we got budget coming up again, and depending on the goals and some of those actions recommended, that's where we can, again, given that priority from council, that's when we can look at for our budgeting aspect, what can we do and really solidify that with some actual funds. But that $150,000 will help in that regard. And also, there may, and I'm sure it will, there'll be some things identified through the process that we already have existing resources and existing assets that maybe could be expanded or improved that really don't, you know, need funds to, so to speak, to do that. So I'm sure that's going to be coming out of the process as well.
Councilman Demerson's in the audience. Do you have anything you want to add to this morning? And thank you for being here.
Just want to thank the Commissioners Court for your support. I think that this represents a very not innovative, but certainly an opportunity for the two governmental entities to work together. And so we're just looking for great success. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. In the meantime, has anybody from CGI showed up yet? Well, I couldn't interrupt Mr. Shaw. We just couldn't do it. Okay, number 11, Texas Panhandle Center's agreement for psychiatric services to consider and act upon approving a contract with Texas Panhandle Centers to provide psychiatric services at the detention center.
We would like to pass this item.
Okay.
We haven't had a chance to get together and discuss. We drafted a proposed agreement with the Sheriff's Department, and they haven't had a chance to get together.
Okay.
Run that by TBC, so we hope to have it on the agenda for the next.
Okay, great, thank you. Number 12, local government corporation, to hear a report, update on the local government corporation from Commissioner Montier.
So just a couple of updates from the last meeting, and Commissioner Kelly joined the meeting in the audience and had good things to add as well. The TxDOT Streetscape project, the designs have been turned in, and so expecting as soon as spring of 2016 to possibly get some of the work started. And the parking garage in February, we're looking for the opening the bid, process. And then we'll bring that forward, because lots of moving parts on the parking garage. There's been a lot of discussion about the retail space and how that will continue to be funded, or how that will be funded. So I expect that to take up a fair share of the agenda coming forward, and I'll make sure and bring that forward. The hotel project is still currently on schedule. LGC did vote to move forward with the, I know I'm gonna say their name wrong, I always say their name wrong, but Brailsford and Dunley, that is gonna be looking at a 9-week project to bring the scope back of what the MPEP could look like. And so they're bringing forward, they will bring a presentation in about 9 weeks, so we're expecting that. I know that they already did kick off with the city staff on starting that work last week. And then a lot of the discussion at the LGC was as it related to what's being called advisory committees. And so there's 3 big components: the MPEP design and construction, the MPEP operations, and community engagement. And so the executive team of the LGC that is kind of vetting through nominations are still asking for any additional nominations. So if anyone on the board has nominations that you would like me to put forward for any one of these, the MPEP design and construction, MPEP operations, or community engagement, certainly just get with me, and I'm happy to forward that along on your behalf. Commissioner Kelly did ask for Mark Lee to be included on one of the committees, and so they took that down. So part of my to-do was certainly to extend that invitation to everybody here in the court as well.
Hope you do so.
Anything you want to add that I left out?
No, I think you did fine. Did cover it pretty well.
When do they meet again, Mercy?
We meet on the 20th. Yeah, the 20th at 11:30 on the 3rd floor of City Hall.
Okay, thank you. Number 13, Flower County projects, to hear a report on various Flower County projects and take any action. Mike.
Good morning. Good morning. I'd like to go through the report that I presented to you. I need some direction, and we have one item that I'll request that y'all take action on. The first item on the report is the County Courthouse Preservation Project. I spoke to Dave Kemp about this the other day. I just need to know, are y'all through with this? How do I need to proceed forth? I'll box up all the files and get rid of them, but I need to know, because we've got estimated $44,000 worth of millwork that needs to be redone in this building. And how do I need to proceed forth with this journey?
I can answer part of that question. We're still, as the last offer from Journeyman was $2,000, which y'all have rejected, and so we're at a standstill as far as our negotiations. The last discussion I had with David Gorzik, their attorney, was that they were going to file a motion for summary judgment in that case and try and get some action going. And so I don't know. At this point, we'll just have to see what happens.
Give you direction.
Next item is the Strategic Planning Committee on the Sheriff's Department projects. You kind of see the right through within the report of where we currently stand. Today, we actually do our mandatory pre-bid walkthrough out there for the demolition scope of work. The 100% construction design development documents will be due to the Sheriff, Jason, and I on the 25th of this month for us to start our review process. Then the next phase will be enter into the construction documents. At that time, we'll be holding committee meetings. We'll be presenting you with the 100% opinion of probable cost and see how y'all would like to move forward. Vicki, we got a meeting set up with y'all this morning with the architect that I just notified. We need to change your meeting to 11:30. Sheriff, if we could please change yours to right after the pre-bid walkthrough today, after the 52. whatever time we get through with our walkthrough, walkthroughs at 2, probably 3:30 or so. Larry has to leave no later than 5. Okay.
I have a question,
Yes.
and Carrie, maybe it's more of a financing question as it relates to the sheriff project. Is this presumptuous to be doing this before we go out for the actual bonds, the funding of it? Like, it seemed like it was ahead of us obtaining the funding.
I think it's like, it feels like this coalition needs to be done regardless.
Okay,
The demolition and the fiber optic are 2 items that we felt this definitely needs to be done.
okay, thank you.
Fire rescue, unless you have any questions, that kind of show you how we stand with it. The fairgrounds projects on the non-emergency route. Matt Crandall and I have been working with Dave and Steve Lapp. We have held several meetings. Commissioner McGee, you and Commissioner Bond, we try to get y'all set up to be at one of those meetings, just to let you know where we stand. Currently, right now, this past weekend, I finished reviewing the 75% design of documents. Matt will be reviewing the front-end documents to make sure we're within line. One of the issues that we'll be presenting to the Commissioners Court at the next meeting is an additional request to Crenshaw's contract due to the magnitude of the work that's going to be required for the Cody building, for which is the curving, the structural replacement. Whichever way we go, if we only do selective replacement or we do full replacement out there, City Code will require us to bring in a structural engineer because of us removing purlins. We don't want to put too much structure back in there to create problems with existing structure. That sounds kind of weird, but those are things we'll be looking at. So hopefully by the 25th, we'll be bringing the structural engineer to you for your approval. That is the last step that we like to reach 100% documents to get ready to go out for bid for this project.
So Dave, just a legal question prior to us 100% and going out. Part of the agreement, if you will, that was, I think is just verbal, was that once this was done, then the fairgrounds would take out their own insurance on the property. And part of me is a little nervous, if you will, that we don't have an actual document confirming that agreement prior to going out 100%.
We actually do.
We do.
Our lease
Signed?
our lease with the fairgrounds says that coverage of the insurance property coverage is optional on our part. We can always negotiate it. So if that's all we have to do is say we're not covering it anymore.
I just didn't know if we needed a memorandum of understanding,
No,
something
we
to
have-
the effect that
we
we
have given this-
decided to move forward with
We've
this.
given this some thought before, and I think we're okay.
3 items that was presented that day to the court was, we proceed forth with the project. Debbie requested an extension on the project to be completed. I think it ran out this February. You requested an extension until November, I believe it is, so we get this worked out. Second item was that the fair board, along with Potter County, split the cost 50-50 on the purlin replacement, as well as in taking up their own insurance. That is what we addressed.
I know that we have verbally kind of communicated. I just didn't know, and I'm sure I'm just, trying to cross our T's here, and dot our I's, just to make sure we at least had a document, a memorandum of understanding prior to spending the work, but maybe it's not necessary.
Was that in the motion?
That was not the motion. That is what I presented to the Commissioners Court that day in order to get this project going. Those were the 3 things that I presented to the Commissioners Court. I'd have to look at the motion to see what it was.
So maybe we can just look at the.
What meeting was that? Do you remember?
I've got it recorded. I can go back and look and see. It's when we did the big presentation a little over a year ago, the slideshow presentation that y'all had. Santa Fe LED lighting retrofit, to make you aware, or Dave, I visited with him, I'll let Dave give a response on this to where we currently stand with that issue.
We sent a letter to, we had some warranty issues with the light people, put those in, and we sent them a letter back in August. and I did not get a response from it, but I heard nothing else, so it's probably miscommunication on my part. But I thought the lights were working fine, because I had everything know about it, Mike tells me that is not the case, so. And that, if I drop the ball on that, that's my fault, but I've never heard anything more about it after the letter, whether they were working or not, so I assume things were going well. And so, I guess we need to contact them again.
So what's the actual problem with the lighting?
The lighting, through the process, if you recall, whenever we initiated this, we had a lot of unusual flashing sequences happening on the lighting, the programming. There's a problem. They brought out the lighting company brought out their engineers, design engineers. They looked at it. They told David Moore with Moore Electric what to do, how to correct it. Now they come back, they still do not work properly. So David Moore had been out, I don't know, $20,000–$30,000 of his own money trying to do what the company had stated to do to correct the problem. As it speaks today, we currently pay Moore Electric each time a lighting sequence changes requested on that building. They come up, have to go through completely reprogram it. You've got a programming issue. We've been losing some lights up there. One of the settlements that they had originally presented to us is we will give you so many light fixtures basically all quits. No. What I asked through Dave was that they completely replace the entire system and not to give us our money back, find somebody else that could put a lighting system on top of the building to proceed forward in that direction.
Well, I've been noticing the lights, they look pretty nice up there every time I look up there, so I'm just kind of wondering if there was an issue, and I guess there is.
Yes, sir, there's still issues. Not as severe as what it originally was.
Yeah, I thought the same thing too. I thought everything was fine. It was the lights looked great. So, we'll try again.
Baseball stick. As the direction from the Commissioners Court back in the fall of the year, I went out and got the cost for the roof replacements along with locker room doors. During that process, I had added some additional doors to it for security purposes, water issues. I met with Commissioner Vaughn out there last Friday. However you choose to proceed with, whatever type of money you put into the state. If you put money into your concession stands, your locker rooms, there's so much that needs to be done out there. We really need to decide how you're going to start, how you're going to proceed. The concession stands were two of the big issues that the city code department hit them on, the health department hit them on this past season. They have brought in a portable stainless steel kitchen, for which I believe both of you have seen out there. I just hate to see the county go forth and put in $88,000 on two concession stands. It can be done. What the cost will be, I'm not for sure. I have not started that process. Commissioner Bond had mentioned to me that he is going to speak to each one of you respectively to address this issue, his concerns. So as it stands right now, I have not moved forth on obtaining any costs.
And that has been communicated to Mr. Ellison. That is what I committed to the court, was following up with him. We have a need to meet him and understand what's going to happen in that stadium this coming year. So he is returning calls. We were originally looking at our second court in January the 25th. And he has a court hearing. He's an attorney by practice and scheduled. It may get canceled and he may be able to attend. If not, we're looking at a February date, but he is returning calls. He has committed to speaking to the court. I've been very clear about what I feel like our message is just to understand what's happening in our current stadium for the next 2 years. And so we want to understand that contract. And I have specifically talked to him about the concession remodel and that has been put on hold until we know what's going to happen in that stadium. So that has been communicated to him as well. And as a side note, Dave, one thing I brought with me today to just as a sidebar, but we did send a letter to the city indicating that we would have work completed by May 10th, 2016 before everything kind of shifted. So we may need to just send a revised letter to at least let them know our work is on hold and the reason why, just in good faith, so we communicate back to the city.
And I think I can visit with Sean May and make him aware of his requirements. I still think there's a cheaper route if you choose to proceed forth with concession stands.
Sure.
what they're directed. One thing that you keep in mind, no matter what type of project you do, your window of opportunity out there is only 4 or 5 months. You spend $50,000, you can spend that today. Millions, it's gonna take years.
Well, one of the things I asked at the LGC, and Commissioner Kelly kind of nodded to my comment, was they have the entity here doing the analysis of what the impact will look like. And so I asked, it would be interesting to know what they've run into in other markets, if they've had an existing stadium or an existing property, and what recommendations that they've made through that, just so we have all avenues kind of vetted, because I know that's something we'll have to be discussing at the court of what will happen to our existing stadium. So they indicated they maybe have some time on their agenda to meet with us, so I'll make sure and let everyone know.
Did you actually talk to Mr. Ellison? Or did you
Yes.
talk to his secretary?
No, I'm speaking with him directly.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. It's been a long time, and I've heard his name over the last 8 years. Never met him.
Yeah,
Has he ever been here?
I've never spoke to him prior to us reaching out, and I've never met him. I think he has been to the city, but I would venture to say not at Commissioner's Court. But it is him that I spoke to.
This is an assumption on my part, and you know what that is. I said, this is an assumption on my part, you know what, assuming that. But where the folks that run the baseball stadium make money is with your concessions.
Concessions.
And so I would think that'd be the top priority whenever we do anything.
Okay. If I proceed forward and get the cost, here's what's gonna trigger a lot of issues. If you hit a number of $50,000, it's gonna be addressing ADA issues that pertain to the scope of work that you're doing. You can spend $49,999 on it, but once you hit that mark or exceed it, you can develop them as separate projects, have 2 concession stands. I imagine that's what it's gonna take to get to each project below the $49,000 limit. But, just to make you aware whenever we proceed forward regarding the cost.
And I think several of the commissioners have asked for time with Mr. Ellison individually, and so that has been communicated with him as well, so that you can have private meetings and ask just anything you'd like to ask from him directly. But I am asking, part of his trip is to make a public presentation so our taxpayers are aware.
Maybe not understanding, the concession stand, why are we responsible for the concession stand? And they're the ones that are gonna make the money up, not us.
What?
Mr. Ellison needs a concession stand, we'll take care of it. Why should we take care of the concession stand?
They've reduced it down to 25 games, what I've heard for this year. The portable kitchen that they have out there met the requirements by the city.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the questions we need to ask of him. I certainly don't want to see.
I'm not asking it, but I said, your concession stand, take care of it. I'm not responsible for concessions.
Well, it's kind of like if you had rented out a home, would you just not have a kitchen? I don't know. We're the owner.
Perfect world.
You're gonna rent out a house and you don't have a kitchen, why would you rent it out?
That's a good question.
Yes, only it's good questions.
Let's let them fall in.
Real fast, the CPS court, what are they gonna get the furniture?
We are waiting from TDCJ, I believe it was expected to be in around February.
Okay.
They had like an 8-week delivery time on that. Gun wall signage, it was supposed to start being installed last Friday due to the weather it wasn't, so I imagine they'll be starting within the next day or so. Hopefully it should all be up by the end of the week. The county extension, the moisture problem that we've been trying to attempt to investigate out here and find out what's going on. We have completed, I believe I've given you a report, the investigation, along with a letter from Allen's Tri-State Mechanical. As it stands right now, you do not have any plumbing leak beneath the building. The water that is wicking or migrating up into the concrete, I still say a lot of it has to do with the drainage that is around the building because of how it traps water adjacent to it. I've kind of given within my report to you 3 different issues to look at. One of them was, once the problem was proceed forward, was it going to take to get the water away from the building, rain collection systems. Second was to remove the flooring in certain areas of the building and go through and clean it and put down that petroleum-based glue. All this will be doing is sealing the concrete and then tile or carpet adhere to it. And if any water comes up, hopefully that'll work as a moisture barrier. Project originally did call for a moisture barrier to be installed. Whether it's there or not, it could have been installed improperly. We just got the problems that we need to deal with. The third one was to hire a expert to perform moisture and soil compaction around the building to try to help us determine what needs to be done. Currently, right now, Nick and I have been discussing, we will start pursuing bringing in a landscape architect that worked with us on this project here just to obtain costs of what it's going to take to clear the site, to remove it, to assist with the drainage issues, irrigation, and then to put everything back out there. But I still feel that we need to bring in possibly a civil engineer to look at this issue, because whatever we do out there, the code, the city may require us to pull permits. We need to take care of it.
So is landscaping a big part of the problem? Did we hire somebody to landscape that?
I'm not for sure. The garden,
But it's been left over.
that it has. You've got the building, you've got the gutters. When it rains, water dumps right next to the building due to that design. Then whatever water hits the building or adjacent to it, you've got berms on the north and west side of it that hold the water adjacent to the building. Then you've got all of the water that hits the hard surfaces for the old fairgrounds, coliseums, stuff used to be that just overruns them.
Didn't we have something on budget to collect the rainwater and what all away from the building?
We had looked at that
We
at
voted
last
that.
year's budget, but we never, the gentleman that was the agent at the time was trying to work with him, we never got any numbers. That is something that will be presenting and investigating, is putting questions.
What kind of insurance do you have on them?
The insurance company, we've been visiting with Kevin Yandell. There's nothing that they can do to help us right now, since it is not a plumbing leak beneath the building. It's just Mother Nature and moisture we can have in the structure. The last item that I need to present to you, will need direction approval from the Commissioners Court. The Fire Station 3 project, I've given each one of you backups of this documentation. We have received our first pay request from CIB, Commercial Industrial Affairs. On the pay request, typically what I do is we require a schedule of values, meaning every contractor that CIB is going to use, whether it be plumbing, electrical, carpentry, steel building, we have a value of what they agreed upon as to the scope of work is worth. The conveying systems out there being the elevators, they're worth $83,675 is the schedule of values. Typically on a project, anytime a pay request comes in and I have not, with the contractor, received or inventoried any items or materials on property, I do not allow them to request payment. During our meeting last week, they had addressed that this was equipment or material being constructed. I visited with Paul Gilbert with CIB the other day. This is a design, a down payment for a design from ThyssenKrupp. We face the same issues on any modification project we've done here at the county on the elevators. We get a contract with ThyssenKrupp, say, or Schindler. They normally request a down payment to start design, engineering phases to design the equipment. So that is what this is for. I have brought it to you within the contract you've signed with CIB, and I believe it's section 15.2 and 3. We could go forth and approve this, but I'm gonna let the Commissioners Court decide. This is for design services, it's not for equipment or material being sold on this thing.
So you need a motion.
Need a motion to approve the $25,647.48 as presented by CIB's pay request.
This included in the 83,000.
That is part of that 83,000, that is part of your schedule there.
I move we approve that 25,000.
647. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand, please. Opposed? 3-1.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Number 14, employment items, to consider and act upon the following employment items, all of them in the maintenance department. The discharge of Esther Scheller as custodian 1 effective December 30, 2015. The resignation of Gail Murray as custodian 2 effective January 4, 2016. The transfer of Wanda Mae Lawson as custodian 1 as a replacement for Gail Murray effective January 16, 2016. So I need a motion and a second to approve all these.
I make a motion that we accept the employment items as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. 4-0. The jail report today is 523 in our jail, 79 are female. None of them are in Childress, and 85% are felons, and 15% are misdemeanors. Do we have any county insurance items today? We have executive session. Dave, do we need to go into
That
executive?
depends on you guys. I mean, topic is, the gun sign issue, and a complaint. I mean, I guess a demand letter we received in regard, it's sort of related to the gun issue. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, but it doesn't matter to me.
Is there a need that we feel like we need to go to executive
I
session?
don't think so.
I think we already met on.
Yeah, on the gun issue, if you wanted an update, we could provide that. Signage, since the topic has come up. If you have any questions about that, I'll tell you just as a general matter that there's I mean, looking at kind of the issues kind of impacting Attorney General's opinion in that, and I think there's kind of been a consensus developing among some of the folks, the other attorneys downstate that we deal with, that the interpretation, it all hinges on what premises means, is that quite frankly, the premises does indeed mean the entire building rather than just a portion of the building. So, I mean, I think I could sum up our position is, I think what we wanted to communicate to you this morning is that we're comfortable with the position that the Commissioner's Court has taken as far as placement of gun signs. So that's that. We can answer your questions about that. Second, on the demand issue, there was an incident in which actually it was an attorney came in and the briefcase was searched. He objected to that. I'm summarizing quite a bit. He objected to that and filed a complaint with the sheriff. The sheriff responded to the complaint. There's nothing unreasonable about the search. So subsequently, we received a demand letter from an attorney representing this person who was searched and threatening a lawsuit, offering to settle that claim in advance of the lawsuit for $250,000 and change in policy is the way the Sheriff's Department conducts a search. We have already sent them a response because the letter was addressed to Judge Tanner and the sheriff, and so our office already sent a response to the attorney saying, with all due respect, we disagree with the interpretation of the law. Quite frankly, our recommendation to the Commissioner's Court is going to be that they reject this offer. And so that's what I mean, since an offer was made, we're ethically obligated to bring you an offer. But again, our recommendation is that you reject that offer. There's been no violation of civil rights there.
Dave, can we get a copy of the complaint and the response?
I think so, yeah. I'll be happy to do that.
Do we need to do anything else other than that, other than the fact that we've already established that the premises includes the entire courthouse?
I don't think any action is taken unless, any action is necessary unless you want to do something additional.
So we don't need to do anything, so thank you, David, for that. Are there any agenda items for next time? Other than the contract for the,
Yeah.
okay.
Gentlemen,
Yes, sir.
speak about the road.
Could I address the commission?
Sure, come on up. If you will please state your name and your address.
Certainly. My name is Dan Shear. I live at 430 Sage Circle. That road has always been a problematic area. I asked for the intervention of the commission. The easements are owned by a man named David Dutcher. And I'll refrain from saying how I exactly feel about him and just say that he's a jerk. Dave Dutcher has done nothing to maintain the road ever since he's owned the easements. And I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that in itself is a legal reason for him not owning the easements anymore. He's tried to fence in property that isn't his. I had a fire last year. It was a suspicious fire. And I don't know who started. I suspect him. I wasn't at home at the time. 2 days after the fire, he came and made a strong suggestion that I needed to move my house, that he wanted my property. He has a security clearance at Pantex. I don't believe he's the kind of person that should be working at Pantex. The roads are so bad that often the school bus can't deliver the kids. They have to leave them out on the road. FM 683. The trash companies can't pick up the trash on a regular basis. When I moved out there, I had a 2-wheel drive truck. It got stuck routinely. I had to purchase a 4-wheel drive truck. There are people who have tractors with scrapers that after it gets so bad, they scrape the road. However, the road no longer has any gravel. After several years, the gravel has went into the soil. It doesn't have any culverts. And so that every time it rains, it has to be redone. Dave gets mad at the other people for grading the road. And also, we had heavy rains last year. It filled up Playa Lake, which on the north side has submerged the road on the north side. But even before the road on the north side, Dave has like a little clan down there of his relatives and stuff, and they were going the long way around instead of the short way because the road is so bad. I'm not a strong believer in eminent domain, but I do think this is a case where eminent domain should be exercised and that road be taken away from David Dutcher. So I ask the county's help on this matter.
You made mention of an arson at your property.
Yes, sir.
Did you make a police report on that?
I told you there was a multi-unit response from Pantex and both Carson and Potter County and the airport. And they might say they over-responded, but since rural fires can get out of hand very quickly, it's probably good that they do. No, I never made an issue of it. It's bothered me a lot, but there was not adequate proof as to the origin of the fire.
Yeah, the other thing was you made a mention about him asking maybe he needed to move.
Yeah, he asked.
That sounds like a threat to me.
Yes.
Was that recorded?
No, I didn't, but probably should have.
No, I would think so. At least let him know that you're not gonna put up with that kind of activity.
Yeah. But, if the county has any extra gravel or anything, we can sure use it.
And Dave, we can't take any formal action. This wasn't an agenda item, so we can just receive the information and then potentially look at another agenda item. So just if you're not hearing a lot of response back, it's not that we're not hearing you, we just can't, since it's not officially posted on the agenda. But very well stated, so thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Mr. Sheriff, can you give me your, not now, but after the meeting, can you give me your phone number? So we
Yes.
can contact you later? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes,
Can I address this?
sure.
Good morning. My name is Lynn Walker. Fair disclosure, I am running, the person that's running for Potter County Attorney. You're probably gonna think that I'm here to go to war with you, but I can assure you that's not true. But I do, before I get to my request, I want to give you one piece of advice, before I become your official county attorney. But as a private citizen alone, you need to put the brakes on all these tax abatements, because with all the discussion of the money that you guys want to spend at this point in time, somebody's gonna have to pay for all these buildings. And if you keep giving tax abatements to everybody, there's not gonna be anybody left. But you can't build a $22 million plus sheriff's facility that's probably not needed. You can't put up a new district courts building. You mentioned, Mr. Church, that you wouldn't rent out a home. Would you tear down a home that was 30 years old? District court's building's 30 years old. Yeah,
Have you been in that building, sir?
I'll practice in that building.
Well, have you been in it lately?
Well, I have not been in that.
Well, go check it out before we make all these comments, because it is something that has to be replaced. And I think if you go over there and take a look at it.
Well, on
you'll
what
know
basis?
that.
On what basis, sir?
Well, just go take a look at it.
Well, no, I'm serious. I mean, on what basis does it need to be? Because the interior.
If I may, I'm
was pretty
sorry, I'll look today, this isn't a posted agenda item, so I am a little cautious, that just discussion wise. Dave, can you guide us?
I think a little, you've historically allowed a certain amount of public comment, but I do think if it gets into deliberation or discussion, it's something that needs to be put on.
Well, I'd like to sit back on
We
the
can
bench.
basically hear your comment, we will not comment back. and we will
Okay,
not vote.
well, here is my request. My request is this, on this gun sign issue. You guys are being very reactionary. You got an AG that's giving his opinion, you got a governor that's giving his opinion, and you guys just automatically acted anti-gun and saying you want to put these signs up that prohibit these guns coming in. First of all, what is the rare percentage of anybody that's gonna try to walk into the building that really wants to carry their gun here anyway? Probably not very often. And even if they did anybody propose to you, like say from the county attorney's office, to say any options? How about putting in some gun lock boxes? How many would you need per courtroom? There's 2 courtrooms here, 3. 3 gun lock boxes, the bailiffs could lock people's guns up if they came into the building with them. You're talking about people in Potter County, these are citizens that went and got their background checks done, did their applications, went through their proficiency and safety classes. These are not the people you need to be fearing. People that you need to fear are gonna try to get a gun in here anyway, same as any other situation. But here's what your decision did do, and this is why I'm urging you to reconsider. You have exposed the citizens of Potter County to liability. It is a very real possibility that you're going to get fines. Judge, are you going to pay that fine personally? Why would you expose the citizens then? Now you and Mr. Brumley are on official record as saying that you want the protection and you think it's unsafe for these guns to be allowed in here. That's not what the law says. Your job is to follow the law. But by you defying the law, you are exposing every citizen of this county to liability. Now, unless you want to pay for those fines. And you shook your head like as if you do not want to pay those fines.
I'm not gonna respond to you, sir.
Okay, so Judge, but what I am asking you to do is put it on the agenda, reconsider your actions. This is attention we don't need, and it is an action that could expose us to liability.
Thank you.
Please put it on the agenda.
2.5 minutes is all we allow, thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, if I may, just in terms of a comment to just close, if the AG came back with a contrary opinion to what we've already taken a vote on, we have 15 days to correct that action before any fines are.
What would happen is we would get a complaint.
Right.
And we would decide whether we wanted to do what the Attorney General wants us to say, or risk the Attorney General then has the option of filing, trying to get a fine against us either in a court up here, where our judges are clearly in favor of courthouse security, or down in Travis County.
Okay.
One of the 2 things will happen. And I will say, I mean, that's why this is the decision of the Commissioners Court, because the county won't have to pay the fine. But we disagree with Mr. Walker's analysis.
But just in terms of financial liability to the taxpayer, if
Sure,
the AG came back with a contrary opinion, we have 15 days to correct it before
That's correct.
imposing any fines on the county.
That's
Okay,
correct.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm. Okay, thank you, and thank you for your time.
next time will be at 10 o'clock, rather than 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.